So it's good that we're starting our podcast today. I'm in a better mindset than I was last night when I was trying to update you about my trip to Atlanta.
True. Yes.
So for those of you who don't know, I'm terrified of flying. So my doctor gave me these wonderful little pills to pop only when I fly. And I literally only have to use them when I fly. But man, they make me a loop afterwards. And then if I have a cocktail with it, which probably says not to.
Oh, my whole family was gathered around my phone last night watching the videos coming in from Sunday and just having a grand old time.
This morning, I was like, oh, what did I do last night? That's how I felt. Well, I wanted to tell you something that was really funny that happened. I went to Atlanta to work with this great client that I love, Insure Trust, because they're really trying to develop culture. It's a small company. You can actually make change. You know what I mean by that. It's like, it's hard in the big companies.
Yeah.
And I was working with a group of managers. They're all in sales, and it was all about how to have more effective meetings, which sounds dull, but whoa, it was not dull. It was so much fun, and we had a lot to learn. But there was this one section that I talked about how to close, because we were talking about bad closings.
Yeah. Closing a
of
meeting.
A meeting. Yeah. Like some people, mostly it's because they've not managed their time well, so they run out of time, and so then they're like, Anyway, and people are already standing up, and you didn't say anything good and nothing. Or what do they do? Christian was saying, sometimes I just say, any questions? And then there's no questions, and it feels like,
yeah,
just in terms of energy. So I was talking about closing strong. I'm not going to go into what I taught. That's what I said. Mm-hmm. All right. So moving forward, I'm out of there. I say goodbye, and I am downstairs outside trying to get a Uber. And it's saying you cannot be connected. Like there's no connection for you to find an Uber. And I thought, wait a minute. I've never really needed a connection before. I've been like outside on a street and you could get an Uber, right?
Yeah.
It was like, no connection, not allowed. I was like kind of stressed.
Not allowed. I like that your interpretation was not allowed. Uber is in a meeting right now.
You're not allowed. And then I went to Lyft. They didn't allow me either. Nothing.
No one.
I was like, I got to get to the airport. No, I swear there's a reason.
I feel like this is user error.
No,
Sunday.
I know you feel that way, but I'm going to tell you that my phone was still connected to the Insure Trust Wi-Fi, and then I found out that they turned it off.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not even the point of the story. I'm moving on. So then I have all this happening, right? I go up the elevator again, try to stand by the stupid door, and I'm like trying to get some internet. Go downstairs, I try again, and finally I get an Uber that's going to be here in 9 minutes.
Okay.
So then 4 of the Insure Trust people come out and they say, hey, are you getting ready to leave? And I blurt, finally, to them. Now they have no context that I just went through all of that. And they literally were like it looked like I was like so happy to leave them.
Yeah.
And so one of them said, oh, closing strong. Like they actually,
nice.
It was so funny. We laughed so hard. And then I was like, no, I'm sorry. I don't mean like finally leaving you. And then I told them, and they said, actually, we turned off everything because we were having a little problem. And so see.
Nice.
But I just loved the misunderstanding that I gave them no context, that I looked like I was finally ready to leave them. It was great. Laughed about that one for a while.
It's good knowing them too, because they like to be kind of blunt and joke. And I'm sure that even if you were saying finally to them,
they would be fine with it. They're like, all right,
that.
She's done with us, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we did this last week. We talked about a personality myth. So just for context, we love to talk about personalities. I mean,
constantly.
We do. We constantly think about it.
We should start a tally board for
how many times it comes up.
Because it also bleeds into, sorry to our families, but
yes.
I know you guys are the same. At home, we're constantly talking about personality types.
And there's no one particular one. We're just analyzing people constantly.
We're just judging. So don't be around us.
Right. We will add you to the board.
Yeah.
So actually, the funny thing is you just said judging, and I wanted to talk today about the personality myth of the J in the Myers-Briggs, which is
judgers.
The judgers. You see, you actually set me up beautifully. The judgers. Yeah. And my myth is that people think that they are
walking around judging.
Right, that they're judging.
You know, for a high J over here, I'm like, I'm not judging.
I thought she was going to say for a high J, I am all the time.
No, but like actually, yeah, you should talk about that because I feel like I've actually learned what the judgment portion of it means.
I
and
think
it's
it's
actually
just
been
the cultural
so helpful
context of the word
of the word
judging.
judgment. Yeah.
It means that you're like hating on people, and that's not what it means
Not
in
at
this
all.
context.
No. And so my myth blower really just is that they're not walking around judging, that it means so much more than that, that they really love to.
Can I give some of my interpretations and you tell me if I'm
yeah,
wrong?
sure. Actually, all of a sudden I was like,
Because I studied in different types than Myers-Briggs. So one thing I think it is there's a natural tendency to want to jump to conclusions quickly. Mm-hmm. Is that true or false?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's true. Okay. Also, a need to like assign good or bad to things.
Right.
So it's very hard for a J to be in a conversation and not conclude if this thing is good or bad.
And it's
so true or false?
True to an extent.
Feels a little too personal.
Does it? Because we have only one J sitting here.
This is feeling
I was
really
about to give
personal.
its motivation. Ready? You tell me if
Okay,
this helps. Because their motivation is to get things done and to decide things. So sometimes they're thinking good, bad, jumping to conclusions because they're trying to get to the main thing, which is decide things and get things done, which is what they're driven by a lot.
Which is so funny because literally the internal dialogue that I'm having right now is like, see, and this is why, Jacqueline, you're always bad cop. And that's
Right.
that is assigning judgment,
But
right?
you're only
Right.
bad cop to the
You're
P's.
assigning judgment about assigning
The
judgment.
other J's are like, we love her.
Yeah.
We love her so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
She
guys,
is decisive
it's really
and she gets it
Right,
done. We
right,
love that. That is good. That is a good trait.
Right.
And the J is like, I am bad. I'm bad. Yeah, it is. Here's another example of where it's a good trait, because I realized it took me years to realize this, that I, not being a J, would too often, like, I was too, what's the word I'm looking for? Oblivious? Not oblivious. Where you don't judge people enough. And so you trust too easily and you get in trouble as a result. Oblivious, what's
Is
the
it
word?
gullible?
Gullible.
Okay. Because
I don't know, something like that. I've had a number of situations in life where
Too trusting.
either
let's
take
just say.
advantage
Right,
of or
right.
get into a bad situation because too trusting.
Right.
And
Me
now
too.
being married to a high
Me
J,
too.
we
You're like,
have
she's
this
like, don't trust
ongoing
so quickly,
joke where
right?
I look at her because I need her judge. She's like,
Yeah.
no, do not
Right.
respond to that.
Right. Right. So many areas that they're making often can see good judgment that we can't always see around
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
management, things like that, Yeah. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to do was just call that one out. So there we go. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move on to really a shout out for one of our clients today. It was so much fun. I'm working with a Gen Z, which we're going to be talking about today. And her name's Emily. And she is really working on changing her whole life because her values are driving it. Because if you read, we talk about values all the time. Values are important, but my generation, millennials generation, the value sometimes needs to be brought to them. What I've noticed more about the Gen Zs is that they're asking about values.
Uh-huh.
They're asking companies all the time in interviews, what do you value? What do you value? What do you value? Because their values mean so much to them.
Uh-huh.
So she is trying to change her life and has just had some really good breakthroughs around deciding what she needs to do with it around work, because she's finally going to stop working so hard and supporting her values. So I'm just proud of the work that she's doing. We still have work to be done, but she's made her aha around needing to make that change.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's awesome.
I'm so excited to talk about this next topic. It's actually going to be a series. So for those of you who are listening today and you might be like, what, give me more. It's just, there's a lot to be discussed around different generations. And this generation is probably, people say that it was hard to lead millennials. Remember when there was all these jokes out there?
Yeah.
And it's even harder, they say, to lead Gen Zs. But I'm not going to actually pick on the Gen Zs today. Today is about understanding. I think we can't even begin doing anything new in life if we don't first start by understanding. So today's episode's about understanding Gen Zs.
Mm-hmm.
And you know why we picked this, right? Is because I've been asked over and over and over again, and we're developing actually a workshop on it. Because, right now, I just already mentioned Insure Trust at the beginning of it, but one of the main motivating factors for hiring us was their leaders are just in their 30s. And the people that they're leading are Gen Zs. And they're like, how? Even millennials feel this like, how?
Yeah.
It's not so easy. How do I best manage someone who's a Gen Z?
And it might help to call out that I think what's been happening is you had a move towards like a changing workplace culture where the power is a little more back in the hands of the people. Hey, should we be working this much? Like, shouldn't we have more flexibility? Everyone wants more flexibility, yada, yada, yada. And then COVID amplified all of that very quickly.
Yes.
So I think we just hear a lot about the trends and the impacts of COVID, but I don't know, a lot of people are saying like, no, there are a lot of things that were already trending a certain way and COVID amplified and sped up the process.
In each generation.
Every generation.
It's just that we're focusing a lot on how it amplified Gen
So
Zs.
you notice how now, like workplace wise, especially bigger companies, there's just a lot of instant change in expectations and demands. It's like, I'm not going to work that much.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was like, well, I want to explore that. Now it's like, no, I'm not gonna, or I'm gonna, it has to be hybrid, flexible. And I think that's what's causing some of the immediate need for training on this stuff, because you have a lot of leaders going like, so I pay people and they just decide not to show up. Like it's different than before. It was like generational angst against each other. That's not how it was in my day. Now it's like, well, no, really, like, what do we do?
Right. What do we do?
I've got like people who just aren't showing up to work. So I think some of those things have amplified, like there's a need to figure out how to
and what to.
Yep.
Right. So today we're going to be talking, this is going to be a 3-part series that we're going to be doing over the next couple of months. And today is really just understanding Gen Zs. Then we're going to talk about highlighting what skills, what's amazing, what do they bring to the workplace? And then for the managers, what do they do? What do they do? So let's just start with understanding. I have a funny story though first. I have 2 Gen Zs in my family. So I have 2 millennials children, 2 Gen Z children. And I think actually Leah, who's 10, is she's 2012, actually the last year of a Gen Z.
Yeah.
she'll be one of those ones that like tips potentially, you know how they say if they're ran out, they tip either way. So Cynthia, who I asked if I could tell this story, it's actually not even an embarrassing story, but I've asked her if I could talk about her on the podcast a few times in this section, because she is very Gen Z. Like, and even as a parent, I've been a little like, what? Like, how? You not even know what to do about it. But one thing she said to me that I thought was interesting was in the world of dating. She said, dating feels super hard to me. She made this observation, by the way. So there's a difference between a parent saying, in my day, let me tell you the difference. She said to me, I think one of the main things that was better about your generation in the world of dating was that when you guys went on a date and maybe it hit its awkward moment, like you had no other choice but to verbally push through the date no matter what. We just pick up our phones. We pick up our phones and we could actually ignore each other the rest of the day if we want to, or we could look for things to talk about in our feed, or so much of that learning how to be resilient in communication was what she was trying to say. She's saying she lacks. I thought, well said, very different push through there. So this generation, first of all, I actually have to say where I got a lot of this knowledge from. This is not Sunday waking up going, I get it.
Or let me tell you what Gen Z is like.
No, I have been reading articles. University of Richmond put out an article. Simon Sinek rocks it. He's already on top of explaining it well. So it's a lot of it has been around articles and Simon Sinek's thoughts, and then my own collection of thoughts around what I've learned. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So they are less equipped to handle stress than other generations. Now, what's interesting is older generations might say, no. Like, let's just say my grandparents who actually lived through World War II. I am not saying that they are more stressed. They are different stressed, but they are less equipped to deal with stress. It was people, I think for that very same reason, that technology came into our lives, which has made them less equipped to actually deal with stress, because what they do is they run from it. They can disappear into whatever land they want to disappear into. Whereas my grandparents' generation, just to be super extreme, when the war was happening, they clung to each other. They talked about it. They dealt with it that way. So they're less equipped because, and also they have different stress, but they have high stress. They went through a pandemic. We all did, but a lot of them went through it during the college and went through it during maybe their high school years. And I'm sorry, that looked like it sucked.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have hated your high school to end like that?
Yeah.
I mean, we were such social people.
Mm-hmm.
So that affected them. I'm not going down this path talking about it, but I did not grow up in a generation where there was shootings and fear of shootings everywhere. Their stress level is high. It's high because they feel fearful. They feel fearful of things. And texting and technology has been a part of their life forever.
Mm-hmm.
So if we start there, I think the big thing that people need to do to understand Gen Zs is that it's not their fault always for not knowing how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
The world has given them a tool to communicate for them. So they have learned to lean on it, and we've let them, because what else do we do? They'll yell at us if we don't.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah. How much is parenting styles coming up in these different discussions and research?
They're saying what I'm mostly hearing is that the dealing with the communication gap is not being talked about in high school, not being talked about in college. And so therefore is forced to be being talked about in the workplace. Not a lot of talk about it in the home. But do you know how it is when you're raising teenagers? Often our voice is the voice that they don't want to hear.
Oh, I was thinking more about I hadn't heard this term until recently, lawnmower parents.
Okay.
Because it was like helicopter was the last big term.
Tell me. I actually haven't heard that one.
I hadn't heard it either, but it resonated when I looked at myself and friends. Lawnmower parent, like helicopter parents was hovering in the trophies and all those isms, right? And then lawnmower parents is a little different twist that it's like going ahead of them and mowing down any potential challenges they would have to deal with. And I was like, oh yeah, that's totally what my circles of parents, including myself, do.
For sure.
Is we try to mow down any potential obstacles.
Pain they might feel.
And I just wondered if that was part of it because I haven't read the research. Like, okay, so obviously what would happen is we're, as human beings, we learn and adapt to it's like if you've had 20 years of not having to face, like, not the big obstacles, not COVID and shootings, the tiny daily things, then of course you would lose a lot of the ability to deal with stress. So
no, that's a really,
to me, it seems like some of those parenting trends play into it, but I can't state any I
can't state anything to it either, but that makes a lot of, I mean, we've certainly noticed it. And so if when Simon Sinek was actually talking about how what they're lacking is the human skills is what he said. One of the human skills they're struggling with is resilience, and they get mad at us for saying that they're less resilient. But some of the reasons that I'm hearing from this phrasing is they're less resilient because we keep removing so many of the things for them to become resilient over as well.
Yeah, it was interesting to me when resilience became the hot topic in the corporate world.
It did.
Because it was a very quick shift from gratitude and a couple others and like DEI and some of the different like equity and belonging issues were becoming really important.
Yeah.
But then out of nowhere, it seemed like resilience. But I think it's the same thing. It was all of a sudden, there was a statistically significant amount of Gen Zs in not just starting their career, but really heavily in the workforce, that gap became apparent very quickly.
There's a gap. It was an interesting point about the lawn mowing. I hadn't heard that one before. I'm going to bring us back to a little bit more of the understanding of the individual and what they're experiencing. I think also what I'm trying to do here is give some examples of what they're experiencing and why it's playing out in the workplace. It's hard for them. It's hard for the employee, but anything different. Joe, you actually said this is sometimes can make us feel like, oh, that's bad. But so did my parents. Remember, my parents thought the electric guitar was straight from the devil. You know, they were scared of it, and it was like the best thing ever. I think we know that.
Yeah.
We know that. So another example that I was thinking about is, we hear about this. Well, we talked about quiet quitting. But then the thing about Gen Zs is there's a lot of actually quitting, which is why people are asking us to work with them. But let's bring it back to the understanding piece. They have had technology. And I'm not saying technology as a bad thing. It is their life. It is true. And we both know that technology has changed so much great in our life.
Yeah.
But we've all had to adjust where it's been a struggle as well.
Yeah.
Well, they've been young trying to figure it out. So dealing with all that we deal with, breakups and communication in friend groups, And they also have this phone thing.
Yeah.
They have this
Yeah.
like phone thing. So it's like a different thing. An example that came to mind was how we hear about this ghosting thing that they do to each other. But what happens is they, and we're not talking like 1 or 2 dates here. This is what's happening is they'll go out for like 6 months. And what you'll hear is that they might ghost the person, literally stop communicating with someone that they've been like dating. Like think about that for 6 months because the communication piece is the piece that they're lacking. So what Simon Sinek was saying that really jumped out to me is that what they struggle with is how to get from here to here, like from point A to point B. If I'm feeling tension and feeling like this relationship is actually not good for me, because I've been so dependent on communicating with my thumbs, it's easier for me to just ghost than it is to push through and have a continuum of a conversation around leaving that relationship.
Sure. That makes sense.
It does make sense. Like it made me understand why they ghost sometimes. So my point is sometimes I'd feel like, they ghost. How rude. Now it's like I'm thinking about why they ghost.
Yeah.
Sometimes what they lack sometimes is the ability to talk that out.
I mentor women in college, and they are, between 18 and like 22 years old. So they are like either like 10 years younger than me or like 12 years younger than me. And I've noticed this a lot, that I have had to work with them on pushing through on communication. They will say to me, oh my gosh, I just want to ghost this person. I just want to cancel this person out of my life. And we've had to have a lot of conversations about like, okay, it's good that you understand that you feel that way and you're feeling this tension. Like that's a great awareness. But like how would you feel, or how have you felt when other people have done that to you? And over and over again, they're like, oh my gosh, no, it feels awful. But it's like this cultural thing.
I don't know what else to
I don't know what else to do about it. How do I how do I approach this? And so we talk about like, okay, how do you have these hard conversations? And it is just such an interesting, I just think it's such an interesting point that you make that, like when I was early in college, like I had a cell phone and, we had technology, but it was different. And so if that is all that they have to base off of, then it would be hard to navigate these like difficult conversations, or even in the workplace when you're trying to have a conversation with your manager who's 20 years older than you. It is a big, I don't know, it's just a big cultural difference, I think.
Yeah, I love that you bring that perspective. Jump in anytime too, because I love that you are working with a group of girls. A group of girls that are all in their Gen Zs. And so you're seeing that the push through of communication is also, it's a struggle.
Yes, it is constant. And I have to back up and like remind myself to be empathetic, because sometimes I get so frustrated. I'm like, I need you to freaking communicate. Like you've got to tell me what's going on, but it's not their nature. And I have to remember it's taken me all of my 20s to learn how to communicate and communicate well. And they're like just at the beginning of it, plus all of these other, pieces in it. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. I think the aha that I had around this was removing the judgment of them in it. Because I think what happens to older generations is we think we're like, communicate. We think, you idiot, why wouldn't you know how to do that? But the point is, they're saying to us, if you would just listen to what we've experienced and how we have been communicating, you would actually see that there is a gap. And we're just telling them to figure it out. We're just telling them to know how to do it.
Yeah.
So that one's one. Another thing that jumped out at me when I was researching was how the world has shifted in terms of, this is really interesting because you know how we talk about purpose at work all the time, right? We've had more people talk about purpose at work than ever before. It really sprouted up a lot over the pandemic, but how we grew up, even millennials in some ways, was that we got a lot of our purpose out of church. So whether or not you were a believer or not, there was a larger percentage of people going to church. So people used to say, my purpose, even if they didn't even have faith, they used to just go to church because their parents told them to go to church. So they were gaining some sort of and that's just one example. The point is there was more purpose. There was also purpose in the way they gathered. People used to join more clubs. They used to join more events. Even they used to have bowling leagues. Like those are not alive anymore, or are they? Are they? I
There's
don't
a
know.
question.
There's some. Maybe they're making a rise, right? Right.
Joe, are you in one?
The way
I might need to be.
Even hanging out at the mall. Like it used to be, we had a community of people that we would meet, and we wouldn't have anything to do, but we would just go meet at the mall. So those things have become less. Oh, and also we hang with our neighbors. We know our neighbors. We barbecue with our neighbors. Now it's become such a, sorry, I just hit myself in the face with the mic. We have become such insulated. You know, our world is our world, that there is less people going to church. There is less people gathering in clubs. There is, I don't know anyone who bowls in a bowling league. And also some people don't even know their neighbors now. So community is changed. So we hear all the time that people are looking for community, don't we?
Uh-huh.
Even my own son, the other Gen Z, is like, where the heck is community? And how to find it is just so difficult.
Yeah.
It's just so difficult for them. So just recognizing that shift was already happening, and then the pandemic on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
So now this is what I'm seeing. When young people now are going into looking for their jobs, they are going into it with a gusto because they want their job to solve for money, friendship, community, a hobby. And now more than even that, they're putting so much pressure on it because that's the one place to go to do that maybe might fix all of those things.
Yeah.
Work is going, perhaps I might just be jumping to conclusions here. It's like work is going to become like the social club that they had imagined. Not in the sense that like they're not going to work when they're there, but they're envisioning it as like the one-stop shop. And then they like go home for the day.
Right.
And then that's, you know, they're
so
done.
what's happening
It's really
is
interesting.
there's a dissatisfaction constantly because work can't always live up to all of those things, right? Because they're looking for. And remember, I work closely at the University of Richmond, just like you do with students, and they're saying we don't want to work for a company that is 100% remote because it's not filling that need. Now, they also don't want 100% in the office. Hybrid is definitely their love, but they are longing for it because they're looking for more. They're looking for more than in their lives. And so that purpose piece comes a little bit, it weighs heavy on them because their values, they want to bring all of their values into work. And they want to know, does work support my values too?
I think the thing that I am most like by with the young women that I work with is like they are so passionate.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the drive, the loyalty, I mean, they would do anything for each other. And I don't know that like, I know I'm kind of on the middle to back end of millennials. And I don't know that like we shared that same I don't even want to say camaraderie. I don't even know what the word is, but they are so fierce for each other and like fierce for me. Like
they'll
like,
even defend you.
Oh, totally. Like if they love you, they love you. If they hate you, they hate you. And it's not even like a, you know, extreme type mentality. It's more just like the amount of energy they put into what they care about is really astounding. But it's also scary because if they don't care about something, there's no energy to put towards it.
Nope.
And it's like, how, you know, it's like learning, okay, how do we then deal with the things that we don't want to do in life naturally that come up? And I mean, I think we probably all have.
We all do.
We all have things like that where it's like, oh my gosh, how do I do the things that I don't want to do?
But we may have potentially been given more direction on the skills on how
to cope.
How to cope with it. And the coping is
exactly.
It's so funny. I actually love the podcast Smart List. Do you guys do you listen to Smart List at all?
No.
Oh my gosh. Do you by any chance?
Mm-mm.
Who hosts it?
Well, hold on a second. So it's funny. I'm drawing a blank. Hold on. Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. So they have this amazing podcast that
I have heard of it. Okay, yeah.
It's so good. They started it during the pandemic, like in the living room, in their individual living rooms. And I promise I'm getting somewhere with what you actually said. And And they did it actually. Seth is honest about it, that he was really going through really depressed. He was very depressed. And so they're all really good friends. And so Will and Jason were like, let's do something. So they started this podcast that now is like taken off. Now they do like road shows. It's huge. They have huge, this is where I'm going. They had freaking President Biden on their podcast. I'm sorry. Could we try to get him on ours? I mean, like that is a really big deal to get him on their podcast. So when President Biden was on, he was talking about this generation too, and he called them the activists. And he said that they are the most passionate, loyal, he said, generation. They will fight for what they believe. And I love that he said that, because they will. The extreme parts of it are the parts that the workplace is struggling with. Yeah. That's where it's like, it's great. Simon was saying it's great if they fight for justice and racism and all these things. However, they also feel that same passion when they're like, I've been here for 30 days and I deserve a 50% raise. They feel these extreme feelings. So this is the other thing that really stood out to me, was they are afraid to push through communication-wise to get from A to B. However, they're not afraid to have an extreme loud voice. Yes. So that's what throws people off, is they'll go from in their mind thinking, nobody likes me here. Nobody likes me here. This manager hates me. I deserve more money. All these things whatever's going through their mind, or my manager just doesn't like me. Sometimes even that, to going past the manager 3 levels up, walking into the office and saying, do you know, you guys don't even like me and I quit. I'm being extreme in my example.
No,
and
the one I saw the other day was more than that. She went online and tried to cancel the whole company and started a viral campaign online. But I do think it's what you're describing is absolutely 100% result of social media side of tech. Like, because that's how the communication goes versus a world where it was all in person and it was the pushing through thing.
Yeah. And what we're hearing from the managers is they're like, I really liked them. They didn't actually have to do that. And we would have actually given them a raise. We would have shown them a path to get a raise. But they were afraid of the confrontation because they didn't know how to do it. And so because of that, they did an extreme blurt somewhere else or quit or left. And so that's what our managers are dealing with. They also really want their managers to be their therapists. They want to talk about their feelings, but they also don't want to be confrontational. Can you see the difference?
Oh, yeah. No, I feel all this stuff big time. Part of why I'm sitting here so quiet is now I'm in a weird position where I experience being like the leader, but also with all of my being believing in what Gen Z is bringing to the world. Like,
me too.
The power back into the people's hands, workplace more about like good, positive culture and people's potential. But it just is so hard as a leader that the way people live that out is often like, well, I'm not showing up to work.
Right.
Or what this client we were working with the other day, they're coming in at 10 and leaving at 3. But they get paid a salary and benefits. It's like, and so part of me is always like,
because
but
it
that's
wasn't
so
aligning
good
with her values.
Things weren't balanced before. Like we worked too much. And I don't think that's good for us as people. But the way it swings so extreme is like, well, you can't, now I've experienced like you can't run a company when people don't show up. It's like,
how do you do it?
It's just actually not physically with the numbers possible. So like that tension is real. And I don't know what to make of it all yet, because it does feel like some extremes have come into the picture, and they're like, but they're good movements, I think, at the heart of it.
I agree that it's just, what do we do about it? What do we do about it? So that's really just, did I make sense in terms of the trying to understand? I was really, this piece of research made me go in deeper and have more empathy and compassion over what it is that they're actually experiencing. Even though I might be like, why did you bring that to work? Why did you bring that emotion to work? But I'm understanding that the human skills around confrontation, communication, have really been underdeveloped in this particular generation due to technology and a lot of isolation.
And it's interesting. I mean, you've kind of been saying this without saying it, but there is Gen Z has so much more confidence though too. And so sometimes that comes out in the extremes. The other day at the gym, and it was funny because it's like the brother of my babysitter, I'll run into him and his friends a lot, and they're squarely Gen Z, and multiple times some of his friends, just like, you know how you're walking down the hall and you're kind of on the right and they're on the left side, and you kind of both like make room to pass each other.
Yeah.
Well, multiple times these guys have like just ran into me, like just shoulder right in. And then also said things like the way I never would have talked to someone older than me.
Right.
And we'll joke about it later with them because they're like, man, that was bold. And it's actually like, again, I think a good side of it is this confidence. That's, man, we did not have that confidence. But then, of course, maybe sometimes the extreme side of it, it's too much.
Yeah. I was just going to ask, that's really what I arrived at, but I just did want to close with like Joe and Jacqueline. Did I miss any other things that you've just kind of noticed in the understanding piece?
I think you did a really good job of sharing it. I think the thing that I'm taking away, and this is no new news, but truly, I think like each generation has their own way that they show up in the world. And when you started the conversation with, remember when like people were like dogging on millennials? I was like, yeah,
They were.
because when I like started working, it was like, what do we do with the millennials? And I was like, we're just like everybody
Now
else.
they think you're amazing.
I know now I'm like, now all these like older generations like love me and respect me, right? Like, so it's just like
But you were just
understanding,
doing things a little different.
showing up a little different, doing things a little different. You know, there's no like good or bad. It's just different. And I think we have to work to understand how to serve this group well.
Yeah. My one other thought in the understanding bucket is think about how much more information and awareness they were exposed to than the older generations. And so, of course, that creates more passion for causes, more like demands of the workplace, more confidence, because you have, you know, from birth been exposed to every event that happens in the world every day, all the time.
Everything. We didn't know anything unless our parents told us.
Yeah. And so that is a huge
That's a good thing to remember
well.
in the understanding. So in researching this, which I still believe I have so much more to do, I was just unpeeling it, is to remember to start with where I began, which was to lean into empathy. If we lean into empathy, we are more compassionate and understanding, which makes us know how to take the steps to work with people who think or do things just different than us. So I've obviously just started to unpack researching this, and there's just so much more to go. So I'm sure we have listeners who are managing Gen Zs and working with Gen Zs, and hopefully this was helpful to you to just think about a little bit more of leading from empathy with where they come from. But we also have listeners who are, I hope some Gen Zs are listening. And what I hope that it maybe helped you to understand or to see my process in trying to understand. And that helped you a little bit more as well. Empathy on both ends. But Gen Zs, if I missed anything in the understanding piece, we'd love to hear from you too. I'd love email us and let us know if there's any other thoughts around the understanding that we missed.